So today's the last week of lab, and after Wednesday, you're done with this class, okay? Don't worry about your other classes. Right, best way to do this, you audio tape, you have a care, audio tape, and have your notes on it, highlight. So I didn't want to tell you what was on, what you need, right? All right, so, start chapter 20, so, where is the heart located? The heart's located in the mediastinum. What encloses the heart?
The pericardium.
Pericardium. So we got an outside portion of pericardium, right? It's gonna be the parietal area. The inside portion is gonna be that visceral, area, okay? Visceral portion. So every time it beats, right, it doesn't rub. Okay, so we have that also with the lungs we're gonna see, okay? We have, pleural sacs, okay? So thoracic cavity has three cavities, right and left pleural sacs for the lungs and pericardium for the heart. The outside portion of the pleural sacs is gonna be the parietal area, the inside portion is gonna be the visceral area. It's very very slippery. Okay, know the layers, so know the layers of the heart. The outside portion is the epicardium, epicardium. Epi means above, we've been saying it all semester. Okay, it's connective tissue. Okay, then we have the myocardium, that is muscle, that contracts to pump the blood, okay? Then the endocardium. Endocardium's the lining. So it's epithelial tissue. So epithelial tissue, right? Right? If it's above something, right? It's epithelial, it's on top of body surfaces. When it lines something, it's called endothelium. Okay, so a lot of people got that wrong on the lab test. I don't know why. Okay, so know the chambers of the heart. So we have two upper chambers, right atrium, left atrium. It's separated by an interatrial septum, right? Interatrial septum. Okay? Then we have two bottom chambers. Those are called ventricles. Okay? Those are separated by an interventricular septum. It tells you it's a septum in between the ventricles. Okay, what separates the top from the bottom? What separates the atria from the ventricles is going to be the coronary sulcus. Coronary sulcus. All right? All right. Know the valves. So we have two atrioventricular valves, or AV valves we call for short. Okay? So on the right-hand side, we have the tricuspid valve. On the left-hand side, we got the bicuspid or mitral valve, okay? Know the two semilunar valves, okay? Coming off the right ventricle, we have the pulmonary semilunar valve. Coming off the left ventricle, we have the aortic semilunar valve. So that they're named for basically what they do. So the right side of the heart is deoxygenated blood. That's blood, right, that has CO2 in it. Okay, we've been saying it a lot of people got that wrong, I don't know why. The left side of the heart is oxygenated blood. Okay, it's oxygenated blood, okay? So, deoxygenated blood, okay, goes into the right atrium, through the tricuspid valve, into the right ventricle. Then it gets pumped through the pulmonary semilunar valve. Pulmonary, it means lungs, right? The pulmonary edema, you got edema in your lungs. Okay, so pulmonary, right, goes through the pulmonary semilunar valve, into the pulmonary trunk, into right and left pulmonary arteries to the lungs. It's all the same, it tells you where it's going, okay? All right, so it's an artery because it's going away from the heart. Arteries, think A for away, A for arteries, okay? So then it goes to the lungs, and we reoxygenate that blood. So all the CO2 leaves the lungs, or leaves the blood, goes into the lungs, you exhale it out. Next deep breath, all the air that goes in, that oxygen we diffuses out of the lungs, goes into the blood. So veins go towards the heart. Then you go from the lungs back to the heart. So pulmonary veins take oxygenated blood from the lungs and brings it to the left atrium. Then it goes through the bicuspid or mitral valve into the left ventricle, and it gets pumped through the aortic semilunar valve into the aorta, okay? The aorta is the biggest, the largest artery in our body, okay? So arteries go away. So now you're in systemic circulation. So it goes arteries, arterioles, capillaries. Well, the oxygen leaves the capillaries and goes into the cells, or the CO2 in the cells leaves the cells, goes into the capillaries. Then it goes venules, veins, and back to the right side of the heart. Okay, does that make sense? Here's that little schematics in the notes in my book, just know that, okay? All right? So all the deoxygenated blood from the top half of the body is gonna wind up into that right atrium, right? By the superior vena cava. All the deoxygenated blood from the lower half of the body goes into this inferior vena cava. And they all go into that right atrium, okay? All right, so no circulation. So circulation that goes through the chambers of the heart. Circulation that goes through the chambers of the heart is called cardiac circulation, okay? The circulation that goes through the lungs, when we reoxygenate that blood, that's called pulmonary circulation, okay? Okay, the circulation that goes throughout the whole body, okay? So we bring oxygenated blood to the cells, we remove CO2 from the cells. Okay, that's called systemic circulation. So, the heart and the lungs are part of systemic circulation also, because we have to oxygenate that tissue to do work, right, to make energy to do work. Then we gotta get rid of that CO2, right? So, the first organ to get oxygenated blood from the blood is the heart, right? The ascending aorta, we have two big arteries that come off that, right? They're called the right and left coronary arteries. They bring oxygenated blood to the heart muscle, okay? Now, once we build up CO2 in that heart muscle, right, we gotta get rid of it. The coronary sinus gets rid of it, okay? So it takes that CO2 out of the heart tissue and puts it into the right atrium. So it's funny, it's taking blood out of itself, but it's going back into that chamber, okay? All right, well, let's see. Okay, so know the conduction system of the heart. So what's the pacemaker of the heart called? Right, sinoatrial node, right? So the sinoatrial node is located in the right atrium. So know the flow of that current. So it goes sinoatrial node, atrioventricular node, bundle of His, right, HIS. Then it splits into right and left bundle branches, okay? And they go right around the ventricles, and what comes off the bundle branches are Purkinje fibers, okay? So now we can measure, okay, we can measure the electrical impulse by a machine called an electrocardiogram, right, an ECG or EKG, okay? So, the first little blip is the P wave, right? The first blip is the P wave. This is when we depolarize the atria, okay? We depolarize it, then it contracts. So we depolarize it, right? Stimulate those muscles, and they contract. So all the blood leaves the atria, and it goes into the ventricles, okay? Ventricles stretch, right? Then they contract, okay? So they depolarize, okay? And that's called the QRS complex. And then the T wave is when the ventricles repolarize, okay? The atria do repolarize, you just can't see it because the ventricles are too big, okay? They mask it, all right? So when the heart contracts, that's called what? It's called systole, right? It's called systole. When a heart relaxes, it's called diastole. It's called diastole. Okay? Now you can listen to the heart, right? You can listen to the heart sounds. It's called auscultation, right? Know that, auscultation. We do it with a stethoscope. Okay. So when the heart's contracting, okay, the first sound you hear, okay, when you're listening to the heart, right? That lump sound, right? Goes lump. That's the atrioventricular valves closing. Okay, so all the blood's in the atria, okay? The atria contract, and now the blood goes into the ventricles. We don't want it to back up. So those two AV valves shut. Love. Okay, it's called the S1 sound. It's called the S1 sound. And that is the beginning of ventricular systole, or ventricular contraction, right? Blood goes in there, and we get ready to contract to get rid of it. Okay, the second sound you hear, dub, okay? That's when the ventricles contract, all the blood leaves the ventricles, and the two semilunar valves shut, so you don't get backflow of blood into the ventricles. Okay, so that dub sound, okay, is gonna be the S2 sound, and that's the end of ventricular systole. Okay, the first sound you hear again, the two AV valves shut, it's the S1 sound. With the semilunar valve shut, that is the S2 sound, S2 sound. Okay, so when I ask what a semilunar valve is, you tell me aortic or pulmonary, because they got first and last names. We want to be specific, so we use the first name. Okay. All right. So the average heart rate, right, is 75 beats per minute. Okay. And what would be normal between 70 and 80 beats per minute. The target is 75 beats per minute. Okay. All right. So every time the heart beats, okay, blood leaves the ventricles, right? Blood leaves the ventricles. So it's about 70 milliliters leaves the ventricles every time the heart beats. That is called stroke, a stroke volume. Okay, so stroke volume is how much blood leaves every time it beats. Okay, cardiac output is the amount of blood that leaves the ventricle every minute. So every time it beats in a minute, that's how much blood leaves. Okay, that's how much blood leaves. Okay, so stroke volume is the amount of blood that leaves the ventricles every time the heart beats. Okay, cardiac output is what it is in a minute. So you take the stroke volume times 75 times beats per minute, and that's your cardiac output. Okay, if I ask you in a minute, cardiac output. If I ask you each beat, right, is stroke volume. All right, so let's see. If all right, so that's about it for the heart. Let's see. So chapter 21, blood vessels. Okay, so remember, it goes arteries, arterioles, capillaries, venules, veins. Okay, so arteries and veins have the same layers, right? They're called tunica, right? Same layers. The outermost layer of an artery and a vein is called the tunica externa or adventitia, right? They have two names. Okay, connective tissue, right? Elastic and collagen fibers. The middle layer is muscle. Think middle for muscle layer, right? Okay, that's the tunica media. And then the lining of the blood vessel is the tunica interna or intima. But both IN, right? Interna, intima, inside. Okay, all the same thing. That's going to be epithelial tissue. Okay, so blood gets pumped through arteries, and that prevents the backflow. Okay, it flows through veins. So what we have to do is we have valves in veins that prevent the backflow. Okay, blood oozes through capillaries. So capillaries, they don't have an externa or a media. They just have a tunica intima or interna, and it's supported by basement membrane. And that's for rapid diffusion. It's a simple squamous epithelial tissue. So it's a rapid diffusion, right? All oxygen leaves the capillaries, goes into the cells. All the CO2 leaves the cells, goes into the capillaries. Okay? All right? Let's see. So large arteries. So the tube, right? The tube, the tube's called the lumen. And what goes through the lumen of a blood vessel? Blood. It tells you. It tells you. Okay. So coming right off the heart, we have large arteries. Large arteries are also called elastic or conducting arteries. Okay, that would be the aorta, the subclavians, right, the iliacs, just for examples. Okay, now they're going to flow into medium-sized arteries. Think amphimedium, amphimuscular. Okay, so medium-sized arteries, those muscles are going to dilate or constrict on the sympathetic autonomic nervous system control. Sympathetic autonomic nervous system control. Okay, so it's going to distribute the blood to where we need it. Okay, if you're running up the stairs, it's going to go more to the legs. Okay, if you're using your arms, it's going to go more to the arms. Okay, so it goes elastic, and elastic arteries go into medium-sized arteries called muscular or distributing. Okay, so coming off the subclavians, for example, the brachials. Coming off the iliacs, you got the femorals. All right, let's see. Every major organ has a double blood supply. We call that collateral circulation. There's a name for collateral circulation. We call it an anastomosis. Okay, so anastomosis is collateral circulation with double blood supply. Okay. All right. So now we have a couple different types of capillaries. We have continuous capillaries. Then we have sinusoids. Sinusoids are capillaries with holes in them. Okay, you're gonna find that in the liver, the spleen, and the red bone marrow. It's made for filtering. Okay. Another type is fenestrations. We'll see that next semester. That's going to be in the kidneys. Again, filtering. Okay, fenestrations is a little smaller. All right. All right. So, what goes into a capillary from the arterial end has to leave through the venular end, right? So it's almost equal because you have interstitial spaces. Okay, if you get out of that exchange. Okay, but if you have a blockage or a backup, okay, of that, okay, we're gonna get more fluid in those interstitial spaces. What's that called? It's called edema, right? It's called edema. So edema is increased interstitial fluid, okay? Increase in interstitial fluid, all right? Let's see. So when you're taking a pulse is the expansion and elastic recoil of blood going through an artery, okay? Any average pulse rate, right, 75 beats per minute, okay, between 70 and 80 is good. If we have a heart rate above, a resting heart rate above 100 beats per minute, what's that called? Tachycardia, right? If we have it below 50 beats per minute, it's called what? Bradycardia. So tomorrow we see in the lungs, right? Rapid breathing, okay? It's gonna be tachypnea, right? Slow breathing, or shallow breathing is gonna be a bradypnea, okay? So we're gonna take a blood pressure, okay? In adults, blood pressure, we take it on the brachial artery. The device is called a sphygmomanometer and the stethoscope. And you're gonna listen to the beats, right? Right, when you blow up the blood pressure cuff for sphygmomanometer, okay? The sounds you hear when you're taking a blood pressure, the sounds you hear are called Korsakoff sounds. Not the Dr. Korsakoff, okay? The first sound you hear, the first Korsakoff sound you hear when you're taking a blood pressure, that is called what? It's called the systolic blood pressure, right? That's the top number. That's the systolic blood pressure. The last sound you hear, okay, is the diastolic blood pressure. Okay, so systolic blood pressure is when the heart's contracting, right, means contraction. The last sound you hear is when the heart's gonna relax, okay, and that's the diastolic. Think D for down, D for diastolic, okay? And that's how you get the blood pressure, okay? So now, to calculate pulse pressure, you're going to take the diastolic number, that 80, okay, it's 120 over 80, and it gets subtracted from, right, the systolic blood pressure, or the top number, 120. That's called your pulse pressure, and that should be 40 millimeters of mercury. And you take a temperature and respiratory rate too. Okay. And that's about it for that chapter too. So tomorrow we'll do lymph and immunity. So you guys study what I just gave you tonight, and then if you have any questions, let me know more. And then we'll do respiratory. Respiratory is actually very short. Okay, so respiratory, real quick respiratory. If you know the flow of air, you do fine. So you can breathe through your nose, you can breathe through your mouth, right? Then where does the air go? Goes into the throat. And what's that called? Pharynx. Okay, from the pharynx, it goes through your voice box. Okay, what's that called? The larynx. Okay, the larynx is made up of what type of cartilage? Thyroid cartilage, the thyroid glands right underneath there, okay? And we have a name for that thyroid cartilage. What's that called? Well, the Adam's apple, okay? That's exactly how I'm gonna ask you. Then from there, it goes through the windpipe, which is the trachea. The trachea splits into primary, secondary, and tertiary bronchi. Bronchi are made up of cartilage. So the trachea is made up of concentric rings of cricoid cartilage, okay? So the windpipe or trachea is made up of cricoid cartilage. Okay, the bronchi are made up of cartilage and it's lined with epithelial tissue. And then you go into smaller little tubes called bronchioles. Bronchioles are smooth muscle because they dilate and they constrict because we need more oxygen for, let's say we're exercising, okay? All right? And they're gonna be made up of smooth muscle lined with epithelial tissue. Okay, so then now from the bronchioles, they go into terminal bronchioles, into the lungs. Now we get microscopic respiratory bronchioles. Then we go into alveolar ducts. Think of a bunch of grapes. The alveolar ducts look like the stems of the grape. They're just hollow, okay? Then goes from the alveolar ducts into alveolar sacs, bunch of grapes, and each individual grape is an alveoli, okay? So the alveoli is made up of type 1 alveolar cells, simple squamous epithelium, okay? So, loaded around with capillaries. So all the CO2 in those capillaries goes into the alveoli, right? From the blood into the lungs. Then you exhale. The alveoli assume the smallest diameter possible, all the air leaves. Your next deep breath, right? All oxygen goes in, alveoli blow up again, all the oxygen in that air leaves and goes into the blood, okay? So type 1 alveolar cells are simple squamous epithelium. Type 2 alveolar cells are called septal cells. They secrete surfactant. It's a phospholipid that prevents the lungs from collapsing every time you exhale. Okay, and then we have dust cells. Okay, those are called alveolar macrophages. And they clean up any debris. All right. So how come when you're doing CPR on somebody, right? You're doing CPR. How come you're not blowing CO2 into their lungs? Right, CO2's in the alveoli, so from your mouth, okay, from your mouth, all the way down those tubes, you have, they call it dead air space, that's all oxygenated air. So when you're blowing in, you're blowing oxygenated air, that comes out first, okay, that's what's going into their lungs. I used to teach CPR, nobody ever asked me that question. I'm like, how come nobody ever asked that? So that's what, it's called dead air space, this is why you can do CPR, okay? Now you just back somebody. Any questions? Oh, so what is difficulty breathing or difficulty or painful breathing is called dyspnea. Okay, rapid breathing, tachypnea. Slow breathing, bradypnea. Normal breathing is eupnea. Okay, and loss of breathing is apnea. But basically, you did chapter 23 right now for you. We'll do it again tomorrow. All right? If you know the flow of lymph, you do very well also. Okay? All right. That's it for today. I'm gonna take that.